Josh Allen has officially secured the bag, but is that enough to put him ahead of Patrick Mahomes in your dynasty rankings? That and more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co-host, Chris Allen. Chris, is Josh Allen the QB1 now, or what?
No, I don't think that we could necessarily just shove him into the QB1 spot after 1 year and a contract extension. That seems a bit much in my mind. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, all credit to Bills Mafia in supporting their dude and then watching him go, essentially nuclear last season and hopping from a guy that we assume to be more or less not a bust in terms of a prospect, but he was what we thought he was coming out of Wyoming, where his accuracy was off, skittish in the pocket. We knew that there was some athleticism there. So all in all, a good fantasy quarterback, but from a real football perspective, there were enough concerns that nobody really wanted to invest in him long term. And so from a dynasty perspective, I can understand why folks would at least be somewhat cautious in terms of wanting to invest in Josh Allen long term. And then comes the Brian Daboll, we're going to just essentially put all of our hopes and dreams onto his right arm, and he makes this leap and his legs too, that nobody really saw. But I think it's more about his arm, right? Because he goes from being one of the most inefficient quarterbacks in 2019 to one of the most efficient quarterbacks in 2020. I mean, the Bills ended the 2020 season, top 3 in terms of EPA per play, top 5 in terms of offensive yards per drive, points per drive. I mean, any sort of team efficiency metric that you want to apply to them, the Bills were sitting there up at the top, along with some of the other great offenses in the league. I mean, Kansas City, Green Bay, it doesn't matter who you want to stack up against them. Josh Allen was leading that team, I mean, for better or for worse. And so seeing this turnaround, and then on top of that, them now locking him up for, what was it, 6 years or something like that? Was a 6 year deal? Yeah, 6 year deal. Of course, that makes you want to continue to invest in him and push him up your ranks. But I get my hesitancy in doing so is this something that we can continue to bank on year over year? Is the offensive scheme, is their pass first approach to running their offense going to be something they continue to do year over year? Is the efficiency still going to be there year over year? Is he going to wind up moving back into some of his older habits in terms of how he sets his feet, how he moves his hips, like all those things, the fundamentals to being a quarterback, so that his efficiency, on-field efficiency in terms of touchdown rate, so on and so forth, does that start to creep back? I know that he marched forward this year, went from, I think, somewhere around the 4.3, 4.5% touchdown rate, kicked it up above the league average to around like 6.5%, which is great. Now, should we expect that to regress this season? Does he ascend and continue pushing that mean forward year over year? Entirely possible. Or do we see the dip? Essentially, can the question I'm in my mind is, are the 2021 Bills the 2020 Ravens, in that we saw a peak in efficiency from Lamar in 2019, and then we saw that drop back in 2020. It was not to say that he's going to be bad, but it's just less efficient. It's less than what our expectations are, because currently, especially in redraft leagues, he's currently looking like being drafted as the quarterback 2, quarterback 3. And so does that warrant us pushing him farther up in our dynasty rankings? Me personally, I mean, I can see the argument for either approach. I still think that Mahomes, given his, we don't have those same concerns with Mahomes. Almost right out of the gate, we saw the accuracy, we saw the arm strength, and then on top of all that, we saw the mobility that Mahomes showed. With Allen, I mean, it's more of a, hey, we just saw it this 1 year in this completely changed offense. So I can see why folks might have some hesitancy towards claiming Josh Allen is the QB1. I'm more in that camp than anything else, but I do think that still Josh Allen still deserves to be at the very least in the top 3 of quarterbacks from a dynasty perspective for sure.
Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen and the team on Friday, August 6th, agreed to a 6-year contract extension worth $258 million, including $150 million guaranteed, which I believe is the most guaranteed money ever per source, according to Adam Schefter of ESPN. Chris, I'll do it, man. I'll do it. I'll take him over Patrick Mahomes. I won't take either of them. I would never do that. But if you have to make me rank, sure. But I mean, what day is it? Depends what day of the week, because I might take Lamar too. But Sure. Look, so I draft way too many basketball teams. Okay, way too many. So sometimes I'm just sitting there and I'm like, let me go look at my exposure. So I see players I'm way overexposed to. This case, Devin Singletary. So I go look at news blurbs on that player and make sure, man, hopefully this player's got some good news out of, I want to confirm my priors. Or
Right.
maybe there's not good news. And then I'm like, all right, I need to chill out on him. So I come up on this blurb from Ryan Dabo, and they ask him basically how he feels about his running backs. And he essentially can be summed up in saying, I don't care. We're going to pass the ball.
Right.
I mean, he said a lot more than that. He said the normal, like my guys, type of deal. But he basically said, we run to pass the ball. And that's it. And so Josh Allen is going to rival Patrick Mahomes in neutral passing rate. He's probably going to rival him in red zone efficiency. So, and he's going to definitely crush him in rushing market share. I mean, annihilate him in rushing market share, especially inside the 10, inside the 5. Is Patrick Mahomes ever going to run inside the 5? No, absolutely not. I mean, unless it's a half-yard quarterback sneak, it's more likely going to be like a push pass to Mecole Hardman or Tyreek Hill or something like that. So the only thing it comes down to between those two for me is rushing efficiency going to be great enough for Josh Allen to compensate for Travis Kelce on the Chiefs, essentially, because there's no Travis Kelce on the Bills, and I don't know, Josh Allen has to score enough points to completely cancel out Travis Kelce for this scenario where you have to take Josh Allen over Patrick Mahomes, because Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill to me are a wash. Actually, Stephon Diggs is my wide receiver 1 this year. Tyreek Hill's my wide receiver 2 this year. Similar age, similar contracts. PPR, just I think there's a little bit more PPR upside with Stephon Diggs. So essentially those two are a wash. And that's why I think that if you want to just sit there and think, how many points is Josh Allen going to score rushing the ball? How many points is Travis Kelce going to score over second passing option in the Bills offense? So when you compare the two, and it's like, is Cole Beasley going to be there? How's Emmanuel Sanders going to look? There's questions. So, but we're playing Dynasty. And essentially, they're both locked up for like ever, I mean,
right.
It's 10 years for Mahomes, but that could be 6, it could be 7, it could be 15 if they extend them again. You never know. So both of them, you don't have to think about contract whatsoever anymore. Lamar, you still have to think about contract. Baker, you still have to think about contract. A bunch of those other guys. Kyler as well. Good point. But locked up at the top 2. And honestly, I probably take Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes over Lamar simply because Lamar doesn't have the long-term contract yet. And I don't want to deal with Lamar on another offense. Almost definitely isn't going to happen, but it is worth noting that Lamar Jackson's mom represents him. I'm not saying she can't represent him well, but she's not, a professional agent.
She's not Drew Rosenhaus.
Sure. Yeah. Which Lamar could easily, acquire the services of Drew Rosenhaus if you wanted to. So, I don't know where that's going to go. So Lamar can be my quarterback 3 for now. Like it really depends how feisty I'm feeling that day on draft day. If I wanted to take a quarterback that early, which I'm not going to, but then you think about it another way. Are you trading Josh Allen now? And in most cases, when this happens, I'm looking to trade that player. I'll tier down to somebody like, you might be able to get a little bit extra with Kyler right now for Josh Allen, just because he's the hot news. He's the new contract. Kyler doesn't have the contract. Cliff Kingsbury could be gone. Kingsbury, sorry, could be gone. You never know. So you might be able to go down just a little bit at quarterback. And I probably do that. If I could get a little extra on Kyler, I probably do that. But it's just a testament to Josh Allen, who I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole in the draft room 2 years ago, last year. And now I'm fine saying I would take him at quarterback 1, at least sometimes if I'm having a feisty day. So kudos to him, man. Kudos to Josh Allen for securing the bag and just being an absolute baller when I'm not afraid to say I wrote him off. I completely doubted him. I doubted him. I doubted Daniel Jones. That one's worked out, but I had him in a similar category, and it seems to be Josh Allen just took everything that everyone's ever said and he said, "Here, I'll prove you wrong." And here he is securing the bag and leading our dynasty roster. So I don't know necessarily if I advise making a move. I wouldn't trade for him. I wouldn't tell anyone to trade for him right now. That would just be so incredibly expensive. And like I said, you can acquire some people have Lamar Jackson as low as quarterback 6 right now. I would definitely advise going to try to acquire Lamar Jackson first.
Right.
So I can't tell you confidently to trade for Josh Allen just because I know how much you'd have to give up for him. But you can view tearing down at quarterback as a viable option if you have Josh Allen on your roster and you want to capitalize on the news. I always advise capitalize on big news like this.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a good point that I guess kind of I want to branch out real quick on it is just those top 3 quarterbacks. And let's say that it's really, at least for me personally, it comes down to it's Mahomes, it's Kyler, and it's Josh Allen for me, like up at the top, like when it comes to dynasty rankings. And if you are debating across any of those 3, and as you were just describing each of their situations, have we really taken a second to think about the fragility for each of those quarterbacks as of right now? So you talked about Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs, right? And Diggs is what, 27, like 28 years old. So in the prime of his career. But if he gets injured, then what happens? Or let's say if any of the ancillary receivers, I mean, Cole Beasley, over 30 years old, Emmanuel Sanders is what is 30,
I think.
Yeah, is third, like at 32 years old. And he's supposed to be like their wide receiver 2 at this point, according to camp reports. Gabe Davis is ascending, but we really see him as more of a role player. So if any one of the core guys goes down, what do we think about that offense? Same thing for Patrick Mahomes, though. I mean, Tyreek Hill goes down. What do we think about that offense? Travis Kelce hasn't missed a game in quite some time. I mean, the fragility of that offense. Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins goes down. He's got AJ Green, Christian Kirk. I mean, there's at least some, I guess, fragility for each of those quarterbacks as we look across like those 3 guys as to what we think about not just them, but the guys that are on the opposite end of their passes. So it is at least their floor, I think, is somewhat protected because even Patrick Mahomes does have some mobility attached to him. But it's still, at least it's interesting to note that for all 3 of their situations, even if we do want to say that, well, Josh Allen, we want to move him up to the QB1, you zoom in on a situation, okay, well, really, how's his so much better than Patrick Mahomes that we need to move him up? And the same thing could be said for Patrick Mahomes as well. And the same thing could be said for Kyler Murray. So that's why it's hard for me to kind of parse between either those 2, Mahomes or Allen, or those 3, Mahomes, Allen, and Murray, because across the 3 of them, I mean, the only one that has really stood out in terms of being, let's say, the better, what's the term that Jordan Love used for Aaron Rodgers? Passer of the football. I mean, the only one that has been the best passer of the football has been Mahomes. So at least for my part, like on my end, objectively, it still remains to be Mahomes, because at least if anything were to happen to the guys that he is passing the ball to, we at least know that he can essentially pull the rabbit out of the hat and make it happen. Whereas with Josh Allen, even with Kyler Murray to some extent, there's still some question marks regarding, like, can they still elevate the rest of the guys around them? I mean, we can make fun of Cliff Kingsbury all day long, but it's just, even within that scheme, Kyler Murray has struggled. Josh Allen, he struggled until things started to turn around. They got a guy like Stephon Diggs, so on and so forth. So at least for me, it's easier to, I guess, hang my hat on somebody that we know to be accurate, somebody we know that can make off-platform throws and make ridiculous throws seemingly with ease in Patrick Mahomes than looking at these other guys that, again, if all things are working and firing on all cylinders, which for both Kyler and Josh Allen they have, especially in 2020, it's just harder for me to buy into that, like, for, I guess, continued success, like, moving forward.
And it's usually Patrick Mahomes for me, but hey, if I'm feeling chaotic, I will take Josh Allen and I will not be upset with myself. But I'm so glad that you brought up Patrick Mahomes because and his skill position group, because Patrick Mahomes is such a band-aid. And I get that Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are probably the best at their position. I mean, I would take Devontae Adams if I'm talking pure NFL, best wide receiver, but they're both in the conversation for best at their position. So if we had to put like dollar values on everybody, they're still going to have the most quote unquote money because of Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. But if you put the rest of the group on like the Washington football team, you're talking about worst depth in the like. And people are going to be so upset with me for saying that because of Mecole Hardman. But what is Mecole has not panned out at all. Not only has he not panned out, but he hasn't even shown that he has the ability to pan out in the future. And how often do year 3 hits happen? Almost never. If you want to go talk about year 3 hits, listen to Jordan McNamara, the author of the Analytics of Dynasty, one of the hosts on our Brethren show, the Dynasty show. He'll tell you about hit rates. Mecole's got very, very slim chance of hitting in year 3. So if that's what you want to hang your hat on, that's what you want to get mad at me about, then we'll just have to have the conversation again next year, because Mecole is probably not going to pan out at this point. Now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is actually probably going to be very fantastic, and then that's going to make things look a lot better. But when you're talking about Demarcus Robinson, Byron Pringle, and Mecole Hardman as your supporting cast, are you happy with that if Travis Kelce goes down? Are you happy with that if Tyreek Hill goes down? No, you're not. But Patrick Mahomes is the Band-Aid of all Band-Aids, so you're probably not that upset about that.
Right, and that's where really that's where it lends itself more to Mahomes being the one to essentially elevate the rest of his crew, versus if Josh Allen loses Stephon Diggs and he's forced to work with Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, Isaiah McKenzie,
that's fair.
I mean, Dawson Knox. Yeah, all of those guys. And in the same vein, if let's say if Nuke goes down, then it's AJ Green, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, Andy Isabella. It's just we have similar concerns. So that's where, if I want to fall all the way back to this worst case scenario, what are the fundamentals that we would really use in order to evaluate that quarterback? And Mahomes is the one that stands out.
Sure. So if you guys are tuning into the Dynasty Newsletter, you're wondering where we got this news from. Well, everybody got the Josh Allen news from Twitter, but in most cases, we get our news from the FBG email list. So if you go over to footballguys.com, you can subscribe to the Football Guys email list, and we just pluck the news straight from the email list. If it pertains to Dynasty, we're going to talk about how it affects your rosters. Not all news pertains to Dynasty. Not every training camp highlight or every small injury really is going to affect your Dynasty rosters long term, but certainly enough of it does affect your roster, and that's why we talk about it here on Monday nights. So if you want to wake up like I do every morning to the email list and just read through it with my coffee, that's how I stay up to date. I really don't have a lot of time to do a lot of research on my own. I have to research for the show. I have to research for my best ball drafts, but I don't have so much time that I can just do my own research. I'm up to date on everything. I promise there's not going to be something I haven't heard about because I read the email list for these shows. So, you don't even have to subscribe to Football Guys. Just go over there, subscribe to the email list, join the 500,000+ people that get the email every day. Content directly from Sigmund Bloom, Cecil Lammey, Joe Bryant. They're all giving you their analysis on what's happening around the NFL right now. So something that's happening around the NFL right now that I actually wasn't really thinking was a possibility is that the Philadelphia Eagles running back Miles Sanders and Boston Scott nearly had an equal amount of touches, according to Elliott Shore-Parks 94 Whip Radio. I was thinking it was Kenneth Gainwell. Most people were thinking it was Kenneth Gainwell. And I wasn't drafting Kenneth Gainwell. I didn't think he profiled to be like a 1-2 punch kind of guy. The comparison everybody says is James White. And it's like, James White is James White, and there's not another James White. There might be another James White with Giovanni Bernard, perhaps. But I don't think Kenneth Gainwell gets to have that title already. What do you think?
No, I'm not. I'll admit my bias. Typically, whenever something like this happens during a draft and we see some sort of rookie get drafted into a place where, at the very least, the RB2 spot can be somewhat ambiguous, and folks want to immediately attach the narrative that, well, they're just there to replace that guy. I mean, especially considering Scott's position. I mean, what was it? 6th round pick, if I'm not mistaken, if not undrafted. I believe it was a 6th rounder, but still, So Kenny Gainwell comes in with 4th round capital, and if we're really arguing between a 4th round running back and a 6th round running back, I mean, we've really gone like way too deep into the weeds, to be quite honest. But regardless, they draft a running back, decent capital. They might have traded up in order to do that. I don't believe that was the case, though. Regardless, it's just the archetype of running back that Gainwell is, the fact that he is also a dual threat running back, it just lent itself to him pushing Boston Scott out of the picture, considering it's a new regime. They don't have much invested into Scott, so they can move on if they wanted to. Me, I'm just more obstinate than that. It's just hard for me to believe that even with the old regime, Boston Scott, he definitely fell right into the Darren Sproles role. Mm-hmm. It looked like Darren Sproles incarnate out there on the field, even when Miles Sanders was inactive was it the 2/3 of the way into the season last year. I think it was week 12 or week 13 when he basically had the backfield to himself. He still wound up being at the very least high end RB2, if not an RB1 on the season or on that particular week, because I think he wound up with a receiving touchdown to close out the game. Still, we've seen him be efficient as a pass catcher, still at least decent out of the backfield, despite the fact that he's small in stature. So it's just hard for me to see the team just completely moving on from him. I mean, even though they've tried out so many other guys that would typically profile as bangers, the Jordan Howards of the world, the Corey Clements, and so on and so forth. But Boston Scott is the one that's remained on the team. So I never really bought into the fact that Gainwell was going to completely erase Scott from the picture. So I'm just happy to see my priors being confirmed, if anything else.
I just didn't think that Boston Scott or Kenneth Gainwell were going to be viable options at any point in time. I mean, they weren't. There were better handcuffs I was targeting in best ball, and in rookie drafts there were better flyers that I was taking than Kenneth Gainwell. So I was never in on Kenneth Gainwell, but it wasn't really because I was in on Boston Scott either. So normally, if you're not going to be in one, you're going to be in on the other. I thought they would both get a small percentage of the rushing market share, which means I should have probably been in a Miles Sanders. And we'll bring that into the conversation because we discussed that pre-show. It's why aren't people in on Miles Sanders? He's plenty young. He's shown ability. He's shown breakaway ability, which is what we're looking for. We're looking for that high upside, that week winning upside. And you've seen that from Miles Sanders. You've also seen struggles, but we've also seen the receiving ability. So and especially with Jalen Hurts. So is it Jalen Hurts kind of being up in the air that's keeping Miles Sanders kind of ADP suppressed?
It's a combination of that and also the quality of pass catchers that are currently on the team as of right now. I mean, who is anybody really excited about to draft from the Philadelphia Eagles, regardless of format? And where I'm not talking about Dynasty, I'm talking about even redraft or whatever. Nobody's really excited to grab any of the pass catchers as of right now.
Right, it was Goddard, but now apparently Ertz is staying. So it's okay, well, who do I draft here?
Right. So Goddard, he comes in and fails a physical as he coming into camp. We already know Jalen Reagor struggled. I mean, he had, according to Matt Harmon, one of the worst profiles in terms of being a separator out of reception perception. Devonta Smith
with one-on-one coverage, he was bottom 5.
Yeah. So, I mean, Devonta Smith nursing an MCL injury already. We don't care about JJ Arcega-Whiteside. So who else are we really supposed to get excited about from the Philadelphia Eagles at this point? And now on top of but on top of that, we've got Jalen Hurts, who for all intents and purposes it already seems like the team is already ready to move on from him. They've already been linked to this to move to Deshaun Watson, regardless of what happens with Carson Wentz, that either first or second round pick for next season's draft, which is kind of hinges on Wentz's availability. They still, at least the Eagles have the capital in order to move for Deshaun Watson. So it's just the team essentially has said either Hurts winds up making the move and forcing them into a decision to keep him, or they're ready to pull the trigger and move for Watson. That's essentially what I'm hearing or what I'm seeing and kind of reading the tea leaves from how the team is postured. All the reports, at least a couple of the reports that I originally read out of camp, was that Sirianni wasn't trying to involve RPOs into the scheme early on in camp, which would favor a guy like Hurts. Now that might have changed as they've gotten more into installing the offense over the last couple of weeks, but still it's been more of a struggle in order for Hurts to get on the same page with this new regime versus it being more of a, hey, I'm going to come in, we're going to build the offense around you, we're going to make sure that you're comfortable. It's not the same as what we're hearing out of, let's say, the Chargers with Joe Lombardi having to work with Justin Herbert. We're not hearing that same sort of synchronization between the incoming coaching regime and what the current starter is supposed to be dealing with. not hearing the same thing. So it's just hard it's just so much uncertainty surrounding the entire Eagles, not just like the offense, but the entire Eagles organization and how they're going to essentially gear themselves up to deal with this PR storm if they try and deal for Watson, that it's really suppressed the ADPs of everybody. Mm-hmm. So you have this uncertainty at the quarterback position mixed with unknown pass catchers or pass catchers that we know to be, let's say, the quality isn't really there. So really, it's hard for us to really buy into them even having some sort of, I guess, successful season from a fantasy perspective, other than Miles Sanders, just because we saw the breakaway speed. We saw the broken tackles. We saw him be used in the passing game, 6-7% target share last season when he was active. So it's just he's the only one at least that fits the mold for a fantasy producer. But other than that, I mean, it's really up in the air for all the rest of that team.
Well, there's really two ways that you could approach this here. So you could take a masterclass in ambiguity here. I mean, you're taking a lot of Travis Fulgham. I'll take my dart throws at Greg Ward. But you also, every week I'm talking about these players that have the stink on them and nobody wants them because of something that's happening right now. And we're playing Dynasty and I'm looking at Jalen Hurts and I'm thinking, come on over, Stinky. Like, we got showers because if you got a spot on my roster, because it might stink right now, but the Deshaun Watson thing is so far away. And it's one or two reporters that are really churning this out. And then there's a battlefield of other reporters that are saying, no, it is not close. And you had the Eagles kind of clearing cap space last week, restructuring some contracts. And it looked like maybe the Deshaun Watson thing was going to happen. There are 20 odd women that have been yet to be officially heard that could just drop the hammer on Deshaun Watson's head any day while he's at training camp, not even participating in actual quarterback activities most of the time. And so if you want to let Jalen Hurts ADP slide because this one random quarterback that almost definitely has nothing to do with it. Now, if the Eagles do trade for him, I mean, I'll shut up and maybe I took bad value on Jalen Hurts, but the odds that they trade for Deshaun Watson versus the odds that Jalen Hurts controls his own destiny this season and wins enough games, wills his team to enough wins to not allow them to draft a replacement. We talked about it before the show. I had a terrible take with Gardner Minshew. My point with Gardner Minshew was, hey, he's been productive in his first year. He might get replaced next year, but he holds his own destiny in his hands. He could win enough games to where the Jacksonville Jaguars either have to trade an arm and a leg up to replace him, or they just don't have the draft pick to replace him. Now, obviously, that didn't pan out because they got Trevor Lawrence, but the same thing goes for Jalen Hurts. His future's in his hands this year. They're probably not trading for Deshaun Watson. That means that Jalen Hurts gets to start the season. That means Jalen Hurts probably plays all season. If he wins enough games, he does well enough, he secured his spot probably for years to come. Because if he does well this year, they're not going to do the same rodeo next year where it's like, oh, I'm not really sure about Jalen Hurts. Well, I mean, could you give the guy the chance instead of pulling him in the last game of the season? You know, so I'm taking shots on Jalen Reagor. I'm taking shots on Jalen Hurts, even Devonta Smith, because he had the BMI concern and then he gets a lower body injury. So people are like, 2 + 2 = 4. I'm not drafting Devonta Smith anymore. Like, okay, well, then that means I'm going to have to take him because that doesn't make any sense at all. Because he's skinny is why he's got an MCL sprain. Is that really what we're doing? The pictures of his leg on Twitter, like, oh, his legs are small, so his MCL is sprained. Okay, well, now I have to have all the Eagles. So there's your masterclass in ambiguity, something I talk about in Dynasty all the time. Just let everybody have their, it's like you're at in the lunchroom and everybody else is at their table having a good time and you're over there sitting by yourself. You're like, I'm at the cool table. They're not at the cool. They think there's a bunch of them. They're at the cool table. No, I'm at the cool table over here with my Eagles players. That's what you're going to have to do because these players are all values right now in Dynasty based on what's happening in training camp. So that's one way you can be a champion, in my opinion. Another way you can be a champion is by joining the Footballguys Players Championship on FFPC. That's a $350 entry. Huge tournament, huge winnings. So if you want to go over there and test your luck on FFPC, wonderful platform, PPR. I love that. Is it tight end premium as well, Chris?
Yes.
I'm just positive it is. I
Yeah.
love me a good tight end premium site. So if you really want to test your grit, go over to FFPC. Look for the Footballguys Players Championship. You cannot miss it. Big, right on the front screen. Join the $350 tournament and see if you can win big money this year. Somebody who might win us big money, Chris. Actually, probably not. Probably not, because his ADP is going to be way too high. But New York Jets wide receiver Elijah Moore worked with the first team ahead of Keelan Cole on the first play of practice for the first time Tuesday, August 3rd, according to Connor Hughes of The Athletic. We had to talk about it. I mean, this isn't huge news. We knew that Elijah Moore was probably going to work his way into the starting lineup, either outside or inside. But we had to talk about him. Everyone's talking about him. So is Elijah Moore just going to be, competing for Jamar Chase for Rookie of the Year or what?
No, I don't know about all that, especially given the report coming out earlier today about Jamar Chase being a little bit more tentative in terms of creating separation during Bengals training camp as of right now.
Whatever,
but
man.
We'll see if he gets there. I mean, the guy did take a year off for practice. Oh, actually, real quick, one other thing I did want to say about Jalen Hurts, not just the Deshaun Watson thing, but also just his fundamentals in terms of being a passer. Now, you can take this for what it's worth, but Jalen Hurts, for the games that he was active, he was actually like back end of the league in terms of completion percentage over expected. He was down there like right next to Jake Luton in terms of CPOE, which is not great. Now, could that be because of the makeshift offensive line he had to work around? Was it because that for the fact that when he did create a pass, it was after him having to scramble for his life and then try and make some of those hero throws like down the field in order to essentially like will his team like back into the game after either Carson Wentz fumbled away like parts of it or whatever? It's entirely possible that might have been game environment, game script fueled for him to wind up so far down the list. But regardless, Nick Sirianni actually did a couple of pressers where one of the things that they are focusing on for Jalen Hurts this season is his footwork, which was actually part of his problem when he was still in college. So working on some of the fundamentals, hopefully that does improve. So I can see why some folks might be down on, because that is one of the things that you need to have. If mobility is going to be one of the things that your primary ways of creating fantasy production, you at least need to be somewhat efficient as a passer. This is why everybody's down on Lamar Jackson. So if he's not going to be as accurate of a quarterback, we need to see more from him in that particular area. So hopefully that does improve. But to Elijah Moore, yeah, absolutely. We expected this to happen for him. Out of any of the other pass catchers, well, actually take that back. Just the wide receivers in general. There really is no other wide receiver on that team that can play all three positions. Keelan Cole, we know he can primarily work like out of the slot. Denzel Mims primarily on the outside. Corey Davis can kind of do both, but typically he can do whatever. But he doesn't have the same speed, doesn't have the same ability to create separation. So it makes sense that Elijah Moore could quickly ascend into essentially the team's wide receiver one. They've already talked about moving him to all positions. I mean, X.
Yeah, Y, the problem is Jamison Crowder's not leaving the slot, period, or he's not playing. He's either Jamison Crowder rotate him out. He's either going to be off the field or he's in the slot.
I mean, that could entirely. I mean, I could see stretches of games like where they would want to see, because they already know what they have in Jamison Crowder. So why not, if he's healthy, Elijah Moore I'm talking about, if he's healthy, why not send out a formation where it's Denzel Mims on one side, Corey Davis on the other side, Elijah Moore in the slot? I can entirely see that.
Are they competitive or not? If they're competitive, you keep Jamison Crowder on the field because he's a heck of a receiver. But if they're not competitive, then you're absolutely right. I mean, Jamison Crowder could essentially be benched if they're not competitive halfway through the season. And that's totally fair to get Elijah Moore in the slot.
And who's to say that Elijah Moore at his current age couldn't be better than Jamison Crowder, like in the slot?
Well, it's fair, but he's going to be a lot better than Keelan Cole. Then he's going to be a lot better than Jamison Crowder.
Sure. But at the same time, it's like, why would you not try and continue to move him around as much as possible to make what you at least think is going to be your wide receiver one, or at least the primary receiver, like on your team? You continue to move him into spots where he's most effective. And then if he's most effective, like trying to beat like zone defenders, or at least working with the defender off of him, then you would continue to move him in those positions in order to do that. And if it's at the expense of a wide receiver that you've already had to essentially cut his salary in half in order for him to stay at the team, I mean, there's just a lot there that, at least in my mind, it makes some sense that I can see him more or less phasing out some of the guys that he's currently in competition with in order for Robert Saleh and the rest of his crew in order to shine in their first season as a coaching unit. And like, it at least makes sense to me from a narrative standpoint.
It's weird to be talking about wide receiver depth for the New York Jets. I mean,
Yeah.
But we're probably not going to see a bunch of wide receiver four wide receiver sets. I mean, out of a LaFleur, like Shanahan type offense. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'd imagine that the 4 wide receiver sets are pretty limited from that type of offense. So the type of offense they're looking to run with Zach Wilson is almost going to like handicap them from keeping in. We haven't even got to talk about Denzel Mims yet, and it's a real shame that he's not going to be on the field. And really, everyone talks about it. I mean, Sigmund Bloom just spent a long time talking about it on one of the preseason watch lists with the Jets. It's that like Denzel Mims is good, and like Cecil kept saying that episode, he is good. He's just not good there. But it's like Keelan Cole has been a favorite of mine for a while, but it's like, is Keelan Cole really that much better? And if you're talking about getting Elijah Moore in the game because you're not competitive, so you want to see more out of him, you do the same thing with Denzel Mims. If he's a second round pick, what does Keelan Cole do to help you out? So it's a tale it's like 2 tails. We're at a crossroad. If they're competitive, you probably do see a lot of Keelan Cole and you see a lot of Jamison Crowder, because Jamison Crowder is actually good enough to warrant not getting taken off just to see Elijah Moore. And Elijah Moore is good enough to stay outside predominantly, like all the time. There's really no reason that Keelan Cole should ever be outside ahead of Elijah Moore, even if there's a healthy Jamison Crowder, which could also be in question, is Jamison Crowder's health. And then, of course, Corey Davis has so much money attached to him. He's not leaving the field for nothing. So you look at it from that angle, and it's like, that really puts a huge damper on this. Like, some people are thinking 1,000-yard, 100-catch season from Elijah Moore. But then if you have one injury or you have a dead season, you're going to see more Elijah Moore than anyone can handle in the whole world. And at that point, it's Justin Jefferson prices. You literally cannot buy him from anyone. People love him so much already just from training camp. You think if he goes out there and puts up, he's not going to surpass Justin Jefferson, but he puts up a close to Justin Jefferson season, it's a done deal. He's locked into whatever roster he's on. Someone could be smart and maybe sell for a king's ransom, but you can look dumb doing those trades real fast when a couple of those pieces that you traded Elijah Moore for don't pan out. So you have to make a decision pretty soon. If you just bite the bullet and you say, I know everyone's hyped about Elijah Moore right now. Maybe you wait until week 1, week 2, because they can't be out of contention in week 1 or week 2, right? So you wait till week 1 or week 2 when these wide receivers are rotating in and out. And it's like, okay, Elijah Moore looks pretty good, but he's not 75, 85% snap share yet. Maybe go trade for him then. Maybe you get a little bit of a discount. But I think, for my money, if you want to have Elijah Moore on your roster, you got to do it right now.
Yes, I would agree with that, because without having any sort of certainty regarding rotation, snap percentage, how often he's going to be used, and then what type of routes he's going to be running, right? Because this is being used all across the formation. What is that really going to mean for his playing time during an actual game? I honestly can't see. That'd be great if it does wind up coming to fruition, but I can't see Saleh continuing to move him around the formation once, like, in an actual game situation. Now, at least not right out of the gate. How many years did it take in order for us to start seeing guys like Devontae Adams move from primarily playing on the outside to being rotated into the slot? So if Elijah Moore is getting that treatment, like, right out of the gate, yeah, you're not going to be able to pry him off of anybody's roster, because we already know from a collegiate standpoint the type of production and how he produced on the field. he has the talent to succeed. And if he's already getting that sort of treatment right out of the gate, we already know that we have an ascending star sitting there on our roster. So yeah, I 100% agree that if you want to invest in this offense and you want to, or even just investing in Elijah Moore, the time to do that would be right now.
And Dynasty is a game of philosophy in its core. And you have to think about, what is the philosophy of trading for Elijah Moore right now? Well, somebody who drafted Elijah Moore probably in the mid second, sometimes even late second,
yeah,
they might be pessimistic as I am. It's really hard for me to even like anyone who's having a positive camp ever. Every time someone's having a positive camp, it's like relentless on Twitter, and I hate it. So I always feel like if I drafted that guy, I'll trade him based off camp height. And it might not work out a lot of the time,
yeah.
but other people are thinking that way. So if you wanted to acquire Elijah Moore, you could now, because that person is thinking, wow, I drafted this guy so late and he hasn't even touched the field, and I can trade him for a 2022 first. Okay. But then still a game of philosophy 5-6 weeks into the season when he looks like Justin Jefferson. Well, they just got confirmed genius. I was an absolute genius to draft Elijah Moore where I drafted him. You really think I'm going to trade him now? That's what you have to think about if you want to. You're not going to acquire him once they confirm they're a genius, because then they can't go back on their genius and trade away Elijah Moore once Elijah Moore has shown as much as he's going to show in the first 5 weeks. Though it's a touchy one. That's going to be tough. Before we get to the next one, I'm going to go back on Jalen Hurts here, and just mention that you were right to say that he was bottom in passing efficiency, and actually probably most passing metrics. In fairness, he was probably pretty bad at, and you can attribute that to a few things. But the problem is that was already baked into his price, and then we got the wretched double counting. We always talk about the double counting. You don't double count. If you thought that he was a poor passer and you had him as your QB10, and then the Deshaun Watson rumors come, and then Devontae Smith gets hurt, dinged up, whatever you want to say, and then Zach Ertz is staying, so it puts a simmer on Dallas Goedert, and all of a sudden he's your 14. Are those all worth dropping him 4, 5, 6, sometimes 10 spots for some people? No, you're double counting it. Maybe you're thinking of it as a cop out, like I should have ranked him lower earlier, and now I get to have the cop out of dropping him all the way down to QB18 because it's the cool trend right now. You already had him at 10 for his legitimate concerns. You can't just keep adding these concerns and dropping them more and more when they're not legitimate. If they were more legitimate concerns, then obviously adjust on a regular basis. But all of these concerns are just adding to the negative narrative around him that we already baked in. So really, if you had him at quarterback 10 or 12, I think that was a fair range. And I would hold tight there, because I could easily see the opposite of what we said. And Devontae Smith is just balling from week 1 on, and Jalen Reagor gets his act together when he's not, the primary target. And then Travis Fulgham and Greg Ward are good depth. Dallas Goedert is still fantastic, even if Zach Ertz stays on the team and kind of dampers Goddard's upside. He's still a fantastic tight end. So I'm just trying to tell people that it was okay where you had Jalen Hurts ranked, and it's also okay to keep him where you had him ranked until there's more concrete reasons to drop him further. So the last thing that we wanted to let you guys know today is about the Footballguys Mobile App. So we talk about the mobile app a lot because a lot of people don't like to go to web apps on their phone, and I'm definitely one of those. I have an app for just about everything. So if you like all the content that we're putting out over at footballguys.com, but you want a more user-friendly experience for your phone, we've actually had them, create the Footballguys Mobile App where you get all the same content. It just fits in your phone, fits in your hand, fits in your pocket. You go Footballguys wherever you go. So you go over to the Apple Store, iOS, you got your Android store, your marketplace. It's going to be on all of those, and you just download it. And now you've got all your content on your desktop. Now you've got all your content on your phone to take Footballguys with you wherever you go. So last thing is Carson Wentz taking Quentin Nelson wherever he goes, because they have the exact same foot injury. I think that is insane. The Indianapolis Colts quarterback Carson Wentz foot will miss 5 to 12 weeks after deciding to undergo foot surgery. Adam Schefter, ESPN, again. We've got a few things to touch on this first in the conspiracy realm here before we get over to the real fantasy analysis. So the Colts pick, and I understand the injury is real. So let's get that out of the way first. The injury is real, but the Colts pick to the Eagles becomes a first if Carson Wentz doesn't play, I believe, 75% of the games or 70% plus the playoffs.
Correct.
Okay. So why would you even think twice about surgery? One, just acknowledge that surgery is the better option. It's always the better option. Never since I've been doing this have I seen somebody decide not to get surgery and just come back. Never happens. You have your injury that they say you should get surgery for, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to rehab it. And then you come back and you play. And then you get hurt again. And then you rehab again. You come back and you play. You know what happens? You get surgery. So why was it even, and I don't think it was that much of a question, why was it even a question to get surgery when I'm pretty sure they can just, I was thinking about the legality of this. Can they just come out and say, well, yeah, obviously we're not going to give the Eagles a first round pick and not pick the best option for our future quarterback? Can they say that? I don't know. I would. I mean, it's obvious. Say, yeah, we're going to do the best option. We're going to give him surgery, and that's going to put his timeline to less than 70%. And we're not going to just give away our first round pick. So that makes total sense. And then Quentin Nelson obviously affects this offensive a lot and somehow also has the exact same injury with the same timeline. But it was funny when they talked to Quentin Nelson. He's like, yeah, I'm going to figure it out. I'll be out there week 1. It's like Carson Wentz is this whole big thing. And then Quentin Nelson, who's an absolute stud. He's my handle on DraftKings. It's just a Quentin Nelson picture because he's an absolute monster. He's just like, yeah, I'll figure it out. So what's your take on Carson Wentz?
Well, I do wonder, though, given the nature of the two positions, if he needed to, by he, I mean Carson Wentz, if that was more of a thing that in order for him to mechanically work as a quarterback, like you need to be able to work around on that. But regardless of the situation, Carson Wentz, like being out wherever you had him ranked, like prior to the injury from a dynasty perspective, doesn't change a ton for me. I mean, he already sat back in the, let's say, barely viable QB2 portion category for Dynasty, without any certainty as to if he could, let's say, come back from 2019 season where he was still like viable as a fantasy quarterback before completely imploding last season. That's what we need to see in order for him to start moving up. So if you, and I think from the most part, folks that wound up investing in him in Dynasty, they're banking on that sort of Reich taking on this reclamation project. Wentz improves, becomes at least viable behind in a structured offense, good offensive line, good talent from the running back position. Let's say at the very least, we've got an ascending star in Michael Pittman and then role players around him. T.Y. Hilton.
Campbell, man.
T.Y. Well, I mean, but still, I mean, Paris Campbell's played all of like, he's played 3 games in like 3 years. That's man. Like that's what I'm saying. He's more of a role player though. As of right now, we don't know what he is. That's what I'm saying. So we don't know what he is.
Right.
So role player in Paris Campbell, role player in T.Y. Hilton. So it's possible, but we needed to see it first. So it doesn't change, like it really doesn't move the needle for me from a dynasty perspective. Like redraft, of course, like completely take them off your list, and then we'll figure out. And then like of course
round now or something.
Yeah, and of course that drops most of the values of any of the skill position players, like for the Colts. But from a dynasty perspective, really doesn't change much for me. It's about what that long-term outlook looks for Carson Wentz at this point in his short career, right? Not even 30, still has plenty of football life ahead of him, but it's what type of life can he possibly have? Can he have a resurrected career where we're at least valuing him as a quarterback too? Or does he flame out again and wind up being one of the backups that gets bounced around from team to team and essentially lives that Ryan Fitzpatrick life for the rest of his career before he gets booted out of the league entirely? So that's essentially the fork in the road that he comes to. And with Frank Reich, I can see the path to him getting there, but we'll just have to put that on hold until he's back out in the field.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to notice a trend here. If there's negative news that's actually not that big of a deal, I'll just tell you to go try to buy, because if it were any other team or organization for that matter, I would probably be out on Carson Wentz. I actually probably would have been never in on him with the Colts if they were any other organization. But the thing is, Frank Reich has already said franchise quarterback. It could have been a Cam Newton type thing, and now they gave up more, of course, but it could have been the type of thing where it's like, oh, he's our guy for now. We'll see how he does. They could have definitely taken that approach, and if anything, perhaps motivated Carson Wentz. He walked
Mm-hmm.
in and just, here's the keys. This is the keys to our kingdom. You can have them. Everything's yours. You're a franchise quarterback. We don't know what those people were doing over at the Eagles, but over here at the Colts organization, we're going to get you right. And that had me buying into Carson Wentz at already cheap prices, because a lot of people weren't bought into that. But he gets even cheaper, and the low end, remembers 5 weeks. And he's getting the surgery, which is good in my opinion. I think if you're not right, just get the surgery that they tell you to get. And obviously,
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but it just in my experiences of playing fantasy and caring about these players, most of the time when you have someone on your roster and they need surgery, you're just like, dude, please go get surgery
Sure.
and just rehab and get right. So it's that 6 weeks, and then we see Paris Campbell emerge. Pittman is already fantastic, and he's probably only going to be better in his sophomore year. T.Y. Hilton, for what it's worth, he's probably pretty close to the end of his career, but he did just get paid $10 million. So he got paid to be at least a contributor, right? He might not
Mm-hmm.
be a rock star anymore, but he's going to be on the field as much as he can handle. So if Carson Wentz comes back week 6, week 7, that's a quick ADP jump that we could have, bought the dip on just because of the surgery. And do those 5 weeks really matter? Do we go by Jacob Eason we talked about last week? No, not really. Because even if he shows out, it doesn't matter, because Carson Wentz is the guy. So if Jacob Eason came out and he does okay, he still gets replaced immediately for the
Mm-hmm.
foreseeable future. In fact, if he does okay, he probably stays on the team longer, and now he's a locked in backup, right? So I could definitely see a scenario where halfway through the year we're like, I'm happy to have Carson Wentz. And you said low in QB2. I had him ranked a little bit higher than that, but it really doesn't matter where I had him ranked, because that's the acquisition cost for Carson Wentz right now. Is in Dynasty Superflex, he's essentially, a low end quarterback too. But when he comes back, he's got fantastic offensive line, 2 fantastic running backs. Jonathan Taylor tops in the league. Naheem Hines, just an amazing security blanket for the quarterback. You can see a scenario where Pittman becomes one of the next big things. We have to think back 2 years, but Paris Campbell was the 106 in rookie draft consensus, and
Mm-hmm.
he, assuming he still has the speed, that's why he was being drafted there. The speed, the versatility. If he has those things, that helps a quarterback. And if we get anything out of T.Y. Hilton, you're talking about a very juicy situation for Carson Wentz. And all you had to do was miss 5, 6, 7 weeks of Carson Wentz to be able to get him on your rosters for cheap. And he could be your quarterback 3 in Dynasty Superflex at these prices now. You don't have to feel gross about him being your quarterback 2. He could just be the type of player that you even go try to trade for right now, and you trade away for him later if everything comes to fruition, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, that's it for us this week. We appreciate everybody coming out. Please help us in our fight against the YouTube overlords by hitting the like, the share, the subscribe, the notification bell, so you can see when everybody is going live. Appreciate y'all coming out, and we'll catch y'all next time.
Peace.